27, he was visited. In his now familiar dormitory room assigned to civil officials, Saikaira found himself facing a presence that felt entirely out of place there. The day after that banquet, Saikaira went to work as usual. No, even earlier than usual, and he was busy. Because of the sudden business trip expedition, he had to finish as much of the work he had planned to do during that time as possible, prepare instruction manuals and guidelines so other staff could handle it in his absence, revise the expedition's expenses and projected post-expedition costs, and draft a new budget proposal. The expedition would depart in 3 days. The round trip was scheduled to take 6 days. More than half the journey would be along maintained roads by horse and carriage, switching horses in a midway town, and again on the return. The increase in participants beyond what Saikaira had heard was likely because people wanted to insert themselves, or their subordinates, into an expedition personally encouraged by the king. There were even additional civil officials besides him. Well, if I'm going, I might as well make use of them. Muttering to himself as he reviewed the participant roster, Saikaira reminded himself that expeditions weren't free. So yes, he was swamped. No amount of time would be enough. Even on the day of the banquet, he had wanted to go home quickly and work. But that day had ended with a lecture from Aresh. He hadn't even managed the meeting with the court mage he'd planned. During lunch breaks, if he tried to work, the half-crying royal family but not really party boy would drag him to the cafeteria and refuse to let him go until the break ended. And needless to say, after hours, the third knight commander himself would come to pick him up. When Aresh came to fetch him, the accounting department would buzz, and it was bad for appearances. Saikaira had suggested several times that they meet outside instead, but each time, he'd get so absorbed in work that he'd miss the agreed time. Now, whenever he brought it up, Aresh just snorted. So although Saikaira was forced to leave work on time, that didn't stop him. He brought work home, received recovery during barrier sessions, secretly drank nutritional tonics, and worked through the night. The day before the expedition was designated a preparation day, and many participants were given leave. Naturally, Saikaira took the opportunity to bring even more work back to his room and intended to bury himself in it. And now, standing before him, the beautiful knight commander was looking down at him with chilled violet eyes. "What is this, Saikaira?" Aresh Indrak, third knight commander, who had arrived unannounced, pointed a bony finger at the desk. Spread across it were, of course, work documents. The handover had been completed yesterday, so he was currently drafting a new budget proposal and listing items he wanted to confirm during the expedition. "I have permission from the department head to take these materials out." He knew perfectly well what Aresh was asking, but tried to feign ignorance anyway. He was scolded. "You, not only are you going on a dangerous expedition with that fragile body of yours, you're working without rest the day before? What are you thinking?" The dormitory's exterior was brick, but inside it was mostly wood. The walls weren't especially thick. On top of that, this elite knight commander, famous in many circles, had come boldly through the front entrance. When Saikaira glanced toward the door, he thought he saw familiar blonde hair through the crack. "Are you listening, Saikaira?" Irritated by his lack of focus, Aresh slammed the desk. The vibration caused a hidden bottle to roll out and stop between them. "Ah!" Recognizing the empty bottle, Aresh's anger finally exploded. And now, Saikaira was sitting on his own bed, held in Aresh's arms, the man's shirt loosened at the collar. "Let's go through it step by step." The nutritional tonic was discovered, he was scolded, his condition was examined, he received recovery magic, they ended up on the bed, skin touching, to let mana settle. It was becoming a pattern. Still, being in his own room, on his own bed, made Saikaira embarrassed. More than anything, the unannounced special visit had caught him unprepared. "Do you still feel feverish?" Seeing Saikaira looking unfocused, Aresh asked. Propped against pillows, the man holding him was as refined as ever, like a doll in his beauty, yet somehow seemed younger up close. Meanwhile, the gallery outside the room had scattered like startled spiders after Aresh's shouting, and Aresh had cast wind magic to prevent sound from leaking out. "No, I'm fine now. May I return to work?" "Of course not." With that, Aresh brushed aside the damp hair clinging to Saikaira's skin. "But since I can finally go on the expedition, I want to prepare thoroughly." Trying to argue his way back to the desk, Saikaira earned a deeply exasperated sigh. "If you want to be thorough, start with your own condition. Be more aware of how weak you are." He was aware. Without Aresh, he'd eventually die just from breathing. Even a scratch could become fatal. Pressed close to let mana settle, Aresh idly intertwined their fingers. Saikaira smothered his complicated feelings beneath his determination to work. I've already compiled the second and third night orders expedition expenses. Huh. It was the first time Aresh had spoken about work, especially paperwork, so Saikaira blinked up at him, stunned. What's that look? I didn't bring it today. I'll give it to you tomorrow. Do that work after that. I came today to reapply the barrier before departure. I waited for you to say something, but I never imagined you'd hole up in your room working. I apologize for the trouble. From Saikaira's perspective, since they'd be traveling together anyway, it would have been more efficient to do it then. But upon reflection, Aresh was the third night commander. Saikaira was just a civil servant forced along by the prince's spite. There was no guarantee they'd be together on the road. He had apparently been in a pinch. We depart from here tomorrow. From here? That meant he couldn't do more work after Aresh left, though that wasn't the only issue. You won't return home? No. Preparations are finished, and the knights will transport my belongings. For a moment, the phrase commuting together flickered in Saikaira's mind, and he hurriedly changed the subject. Where is your residence, Commander? Aresh-sama? He had assumed it would be inside the palace or in knight quarters. But surprisingly, Aresh still lived at his family home. At your family estate. He recalled Aresh belonged to a marquee house. Coming from modern Japan where class systems had been abolished, it didn't quite register, but that was quite high rank. Do you have siblings? Wondering if it was normal for an adult son with a position to live at home, he asked casually. Aresh blinked in mild surprise. 2 older brothers. 1 older sister. So this overbearing, beautiful knight commander was the youngest. That fits, Saikaira nodded internally. Sensing something, Aresh frowned and tugged at his ear. That hurts. That little. Does everyone still live at home? No. My sister is married, and my second brother has his own estate. The eldest would inherit the main house, presumably. Then why did Aresh live there? His expression must have betrayed his curiosity. I have quarters at the night dormitory, but my family home is closer to the palace and less troublesome. So I mostly live there. I see. Nodding, thinking he's a young master, probably not suited to communal living, he had his other ear tugged. That hurts. Humph. What about you? It took him a few seconds to realize Aresh meant siblings. I'm an only child. That sounds about right. It felt like a playful jab, but likely sincere. Saikaira also thought he seemed like an only child. When he was young, he'd envied those with siblings, but receiving all his parents' affection probably meant he'd been fortunate. Still, given his current situation, he sometimes thought having siblings might have been better. I'm their only son, busy with work, rarely returning home even during holidays, and not particularly coddled as the son. Still, in a world where he'd vanished, what were his parents thinking now? If possible, he hoped they believed he'd come back someday. And since he could no longer care for them in their old age, he hoped they were properly receiving the assets he'd left behind. As he thought about his hometown and parents, things he usually avoided dwelling on, a low, resonant voice began chanting above him. No matter how many times he heard it, it sounded like singing. Today it was a little longer. Like a lullaby. His feverish mind drifted, and then his lips were sealed.